Imagine walking into a marketplace, not filled with dust or heat, but with something heavier, noise. Not the noise of merchants or children, but the dull hum of unthinking agreement. Everywhere, faces nod in rhythm, voices echo words they never wrote. And then there's you, the only one moving against the tide. In that instant, you realize the truth. In a world that worships individuality, nothing is feared more than a mind that dares to think for itself. But you notice something different. You're not moving with the tide. You try to speak, not to provoke, but to point out the obvious. And instantly, the air shifts. Silence falls. Not the silence of peace, but of judgment. The eyes that once ignored you now weigh you, labeling you guilty of independent thought. This is the paradox of our age. We claim to celebrate individuality, yet demand conformity more than ever before. We are told to be ourselves, but only if it fits within the boundaries of comfort. We are promised freedom, yet most surrender it willingly, terrified of standing alone. Why? Why does the crowd fear the lone voice? Why do intelligent people dissolve into mediocrity when placed in groups? Why do we confuse loudness with truth? Look closer at everyday life. Conversations with friends, family, colleagues often feel scripted, lines rehearsed by culture, delivered without reflection. Few dare to ask where the script came from, few dare to discard it. You begin to see the epidemic is not ignorance, but obedience. Not a lack of knowledge, but an overflow of untested beliefs. Noise surrounds us. Political noise, cultural noise, social media noise. Thinking is exhausting, so we outsource it. We let the loudest decide what's real, then mimic them. It feels safe. But here's the dangerous question. If most people have already surrendered their minds to the collective, then who are you really following? And if you refuse to follow, are you ready to face the exile that comes with clarity? The crowd calls leaving madness. But what if true madness is staying? The tension grows between belonging and being free. You realize choosing one means losing the other. And in that awareness, the market's hum grows unbearable. The most dangerous prison isn't made of steel, but of thoughts. Its walls are built of illusions, its guards are the prisoners themselves. Carl Jung wrote of the collective unconscious, patterns and myths shaping us like water around fish. Nietzsche spoke of the herd instinct, our ancient terror of standing apart. Once a survival mechanism, today it is weaponized with ridicule, cancellation, algorithms, and endless repetition. Schopenhauer warned that truth is mocked before it's ever accepted. In a world drowning in conformity, most truths die in ridicule, never reaching their second breath. Mass psychosis is not stupidity. It's the deliberate suspension of thought to avoid the discomfort of dissent. Huxley foresaw this in Brave New World, a society lulled into obedience, not by fear, but by comfort and distraction. Ignorance chosen, not imposed. Groupthink ensures harmony at the cost of truth. Ash's conformity experiments showed how even the obvious bends under pressure. Our brains are wired, not for truth, but for survival. And survival once meant blending in. But in the age of mass communication, the crowd is no longer 100 people, but millions, and the pressure to conform is suffocating. How many of your beliefs are truly yours? How much is merely residue from repetition? Sartre called it bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to escape freedom. Mass psychosis is civilization-wide bad faith, pretending reality is simple because truth demands courage. History shows us the cost. Witch hunts, fascism, financial bubbles, crowds convincing themselves they are sane, blind to their madness. Psychology calls it pluralistic ignorance. Everyone sees the smoke, but no one moves because no one else does. Today, that smoke fills our lungs. Biases, confirmation, authority, bandwagon are tribal tools for survival, but fatal in modern scale. The longer you silence your own questioning, the weaker it becomes. Skepticism atrophies. Soon, obedience isn't enforced, it's instinct. And when the mind kneels, the soul follows. Civilizations don't collapse from ignorance, they corrode from comfort. And when delusion becomes collective, the sane are painted insane. Try waking a sleepwalker and they'll lash out. Try telling a deluded crowd it's wrong and they'll call you the danger. This is why truth is costly. If you stay silent, you aid the madness. If you speak, you risk exile. The question remains, will you be the lone voice of reason in a room that has forgotten reason exists? Rebellion begins not in the streets, but in the mind. With the thought, what if they're all wrong? That single thought shakes the foundations. The safety you once felt is revealed as sedation. Breaking free isn't shouting louder. The crowd feeds on noise. True rebellion is withdrawal from its frequency. Reclaim your attention. It's the front line of freedom. Reclaim your language. Corrupted words corrupt thought. Reclaim silence. The crowd fears it because silence births clarity. Reclaim your courage. Freedom costs the willingness to be disliked. And reclaim your community. Not another echo chamber, but fellow seekers of truth. Yet to find them, you must first endure solitude. Freedom is not clarity handed to you. It is messy, uncertain, demanding constant thought. Most retreat back into the herd, but if you endure, patterns emerge. The psychology of obedience, the architecture of delusion, the strings and the hands that pull them. Once seen, they cannot be unseen. This is sovereignty. Not power given by governments, but freedom no one can take unless you surrender it. Your existence outside the trance is itself rebellion. Every free mind is a crack in the wall. The harsh truth? The crowd was never your enemy. It only reflected your desire to belong. The chains weren't forged solely by society. You helped forge them each time you chose safety over truth. Real liberation begins when you confront that. Individuation, Jung said, is integration of the shadow, acknowledging why you once loved conformity. Only then can you avoid returning to it. And once you see the sleepers as mirrors of your former self, bitterness fades. True freedom is measured not by how far you've run from the herd, but by how little power it still has over you. The opposite of mass psychosis is not isolation, but sovereignty, the ability to think and act untouched by manipulation. You cannot save everyone, but you can remain awake. Your clarity becomes a quiet beacon for those ready to see. And in that stillness, you rediscover your own voice. Not rebellion, not reaction, just yours. A voice that does not need approval, that was never chained, that whispers truths indifferent to consensus. And so you walk away from the marketplace. The hum fades behind you. The road ahead is quieter, lonelier, uncertain, but it is yours. And for the first time, you understand you were never meant to be one of them. You were meant to be free. And so the question remains, will you keep dancing to a song you never chose? Or will you have the courage to walk in silence? Because the greatest prison is not made of bars, but of thoughts. The deepest chains are not forged by society alone, but by our own longing to belong. Freedom doesn't come when the crowd changes. It comes when you no longer need its approval. And in that silence, in that stillness, you hear it, the voice that was always yours. Not the crowd's voice, not rebellion's voice, just yours. The world may never change for you, but you will change for the world. And that is the beginning of true freedom.